and welcome to Forbidden Planet TV. Now, this is going to be, I'm already putting it out there, one of my favourite episodes ever, because this is one of my bestest friends, Alwyn Hamilton, and she is on to talk about Notorious Virtues, about to drop in a week's time.
Yeah,
right?
That's right.
Which is crazy.
March 27th in the UK, April 1st in the US. It's not a prank, I promise.
It's a real,
Everyone's like, is it
thing.
coming out or is this a joke? I was like, no, I swear it's coming out April 1st.
God damn. And we were obviously just discussing off camera how this is kind of your first book in 7?
Yes, how dare you? Yes, that's right.
And you know, like, so we haven't been able to do anything before.
Yeah, that's right, because you only started FPTV during lockdown.
It was
when we all needed entertainment and fantasy and sci-fi and something to do, something to watch. But yes, I'm glad that I get the opportunity to be on your baby now. So yeah, 7 years in the making then. Yes, inadvertently, but yes.
Yes. What can you tell everyone about Notorious Virtues, like spoiler free as much as possible? I know.
Spoiler free, I pitched the Notorious Virtues initially as 1920s New York heiresses meets grim fairy tales, and that was sort of the original pitch, and that's still what it is, but it's obviously had a lot of things added to it in the time since pitching to it coming out. And it's basically the story of a family that is very wealthy and has passed down wealth generationally by having a trial every generation to see who's the most virtuous, who is the most worthy heir. And it's time for this generation's trial, which has come a little bit unexpectedly because the previous heiress has been murdered. And so the cousins are kind of having to step in unexpectedly to compete against each other in this trial of virtues to see who gets all of the wealth and power in this family. So yeah.
And there are many POVs. There's
four and a half. Yeah.
There's a few in there.
Yeah.
Now, I know no one likes to pick a favourite.
It's Nora. Sorry, was there going to be a question at the end?
I'm just like, why is it? But is there kind of, talk a little bit maybe about those characters, and then if there's anyone that really kind of changed from your initial kind of ideas to how they're now.
So the 4 points of view are Nora, who was the heiress presumptive until the murder of her mother, so always thought she was going to inherit because she was an only child. There was no one to compete against, but now that her mother's gone, she does have to compete against her cousins. So she's kind of someone described her as a cross between Blair from Gossip Girl and, no, I'm forgetting who else they said, but I'm gonna say Tony Stark, because she has also got she's also kind of, she's glamorous and she's beautiful and she's a socialite, but she's also a genius, a technological genius, and extremely self-assured in a way that isn't a front. She just knows she's that great. So that's Nora. And then Lotte is a little bit of a rogue component. So she is also competing for all the money in the family, but she has only just found out that she is part of this family. She is an illegitimate child who was secreted away at birth, and has been brought back into the fold now that there's this competition happening so that she can compete as well with the rest of her cousins. And then there's 2 characters who are not part of the main family, one of whom is Theo, and he is a knight who serves the family. So similar to the way that the Holtzfalls, the main family of the book, have generational trials that have gone for 1,000 years, his family have been pledged as knights to them for 1,000 years. And so he's another point of view character, and his brother apparently seems to have died when the last heiress died. He was charged with protecting her, and she's dead. He's missing. Rapidly finds out. But we all know that if you didn't see a body on page, then no one is dead. That's not I don't think that's a huge spoiler. And then the final character, who is one who came in unexpectedly. When I pitched the book, it was those 3 points of view. And then the final character is August, who is a journalist who gets involved with Nora to help uncover what might have happened with her mother's murder, because it might not be as straightforward as the police has led them to believe. And he is a character that came in when the murder plot line came in, because rapidly realized that Nora needed someone to talk to. That otherwise it was a lot of her like just sleuthing and being smart, and she sort of needed a sidekick. I think he'd want to say that she was his sidekick, is Jolissa's sidekick. She definitely thinks everyone is her sidekick. So yeah, he came in unexpectedly, and Nora and August's sort of banter and relationship was one of the most fun things to write. So I'm glad he did appear in the book a little bit roguely.
And it's almost kind of like, I would describe the book almost Inception style, because you have stories within stories, in the sense that when you first start reading and you're just like, okay, we have this family dynamic, we have a world of magic, and wealth equals power, and how people are using that. But then, like you touched on, you've got, missing like family members, you've got a murder, you've got all these kind of subplots. Was it like difficult to kind of keep track of everything? Like how? Yeah,
it was a nightmare. No, I one of the reasons that I wanted to write The Notorious Virtues is because my first series, Rebel of the Sands, is one POV, and that's great, and I was very much in her head. By the end of it, I was like, oh my god, I need to talk to some other people. Like we need new friends, you and I, kind of thing. You go off and live in your world, and I'm going to write some different characters now. And that is a challenge because everyone needs some agency, everyone needs something to do, and the plot lines intersect so much. And I've tried different ways of keeping track of it, like on paper, things like that. I think it did all come together in the end. I tried a writing tool called Plotter, which is PLOTTR, where you can sort of do like, chapter 1 and you can do it by like, so I had sort of like this character's point of view, what are they up to, and color coded like the mystery versus the trials versus this person wants to find out who her dad is, so that's color coded a different way. I tried that for a while. At one point, what I did when I sort of just started pulling apart the book, because I had this book took a long time for a number of reasons. The lockdown and pandemic was one of those reasons that I really struggled to write in that time period. And so I had about a 9-month break in it from sort of the lockdown started in March, and then I looked at it again at Christmas, because I just had sat down every day with the best intention to write and frozen up. And finally I was like, had enough space from it. I think in a weird way that was good. That was what I needed. And one of the things I did to sort of get back to the book was wrote down every single plot line or every single plot point on a Post-it and spread them all out over a table, and then just started like being like, well, that's useless and that's useless and that needs to be here, and pulled it apart. And I was doing that. I was at that point locked down at my parents' place, and so I did it on a giant desk, and then it was time to come back to London, and I was like, oh no, I have to travel with this. So I like took all the Post-its like carefully and was like, don't mix up the order. Could have written numbers on them, didn't. Don't and they were all like color coded, and I was like, and then I have at the back of my house, as you've seen, I got a giant glass wall, and so I stuck them all up on the glass wall, because that's what I face when I'm writing, is a view of my garden. And so it was almost like a punishment, like I blocked out the sun, and until I sort of replotted this whole book, I couldn't see the sun and couldn't see my garden. So it was a process.
It forced you to.
Yeah, it forced me. I was like, if I ever want to see the beautiful view of my flowers again, then I need to like. And finally, when I replotted and everything was in place, I was able to take them off and see the sky again.
It's so interesting as well how, I think a lot of people were super productive during lockdown, but I think for many, I would include myself in this, I found it more difficult than I thought I was going to do. I think
everyone I know who was productive in terms of books in lockdown, and this is a broad generalization, I'm sure there's a million examples that'll come with me why I'm wrong in a minute, but a lot of people I know who wrote books in lockdown were not at that time contracted to write books. So there are people who had done their law degree and then didn't have a law firm to go to because everything was shut down. They weren't recruiting, and so they thought, oh, in this time I'll write my book. I know 2 different people who were supposed to be lawyers and turned into writers, kind of thing. Whereas I think those of us for whom it was a job and not a distraction found it very difficult. And I wasn't for various reasons, wasn't in a great place with this book when we went into lockdown. So, and people who were in a great place with their books still struggle to write. So not being in a great place, I think I struggled even more with that. So I think, it's it was very hard to, I think we're all seeking distractions, and so we all wanted to like read and watch TV, and for those of us who it was a fun distraction, right? But for those of us who it's like the world is on fire, but the most important thing in the world to your editors is that you turn this book in on time. It was hard. That was hard to sort of care about. Hard to be like, oh, this is a priority. When every time I refresh my phone, there's a new death count kind of thing. Not to be morbid, but you know, like that was a dark time. Like, you know,
it was crazy going out for you like one walk a day.
I did my one walk a day when because there was a certain point where again, giant glass wall, where the sun would hit my face, like at a point that I couldn't see anything. I'd be like, I can't, so it was like, time for the walk a day. It's hit my desk right full on. I can't actually see my computer screen anymore. But I did a lot of like playing The Sims as a distraction rather than writing, because writing felt very fraught at that time.
Yes. Yeah. No, that's, well, I think I would think that the book is kind of maybe, I mean, I'm loving it so far, and I think that it, like you said, that being able to take some time to remove yourself from it and then come back to it. We have to talk about like the characters' relationships, especially like Nora and Lotte. Like I just love how that relationship is kind of, it feels like a kind of focused relationship, and at first you don't think they're necessarily going to kind of get along that well. They obviously from very different kind of backgrounds and stuff. How important is that kind of female friendship to your books?
I'm not against having sort of women compete with other women in books. But I don't like the stereotype of like we see each other and we hate each other for no reason, and one's the mean girl, you know, kind of thing. And there is very difficult relationships between the all-female cousins in the books that are tied to a very fraught sort of upbringing between all of them. And I think it would be extremely hard if you knew that you were kind of being brought up to compete against each other very directly. You'd wind up like Tahani and her sister in The Good Place kind of thing. It's like that kind of dynamic. But it's, and so there is an immediate animosity towards Lotte from Nora that I think, if it was just Lottie's point of view, could come across as like, she's the bitchy mean girl from every cliche thing. But from Nora's point of view, she's having a really hard time. Like her mother has just been murdered. She looks to her aunt as a mother figure, and her aunt's like, I don't need you, I've got a daughter, you know, kind of thing, which it would just be devastating. And also Nora is, the Holtzfall family in it, who are the main family, are all sort of blonde hair, blue-eyed, milkmaid-looking girls, and Nora is half foreign. She is, so she's dark hair, dark-eyed, so she's the most Holtzfall one of them, but looks the least like them. And so in walks this cousin who looks exactly like, you know, what you'd paint if you were painting a Holtzfall painting of her, and she's like, well, that sucks. She looks more like my mom than I do, you know, kind of thing. And then I think as she gets to know her, and as they get to know each other, that relationship changes. But I don't, I feel like I'd have a hard time begrudging her animosity early on. But I also wanted their relationship to be earned. I love a good female friendship. There's a female friendship I value a lot in my first series, Rub the Sands, between my main character Mani and Shazad. And theirs is very instant and very, you know, they sort of meet each other and see equals in each other, and it's basically like that scene from Step Brothers, be like, do we just become best friends like immediately? And I love that too, but I wanted this to feel a little bit more fraught and complex, because I think all family relationships are a little bit more fraught and complex. When you're related. So I think I still think it's an interesting thing, because I think there's a theme of chosen family in the book, but they are biological family as well, but they've just chosen to be like, us two, the rest of you are nightmares, because they are truly, like, the rest of their cousins and several of their aunts and uncles are kind of nightmares.
And the, I suppose even, as well as the friendship, even just the development of kind of each character on their own, it's so interesting to kind of, like, no one person in the real world is 100% anything, 100% good or neutral or whatever. And I quite liked, there's a bit quite early on where Lotte is still in her village, and a friend of hers, like her best friend, is going to be potentially leaving the village, and you there's a kind of a desperation to have the friend to stay, and what she would do to make that friend stay. It's just so interesting that you don't have this like country bumpkin stereotype.
Yeah.
But you actually have someone who's become clever in her own kind
I'm
of
glad you
way.
caught that about the stereotype thing, because that was something I there's been so many drafts of this book, but it's been played up at various points in the draft that I really wanted her to be perceived by people coming into the city the way that for some reason, like, there's this perception of like these innocent country folks and they just have, you know, better morals than us, and oh, she doesn't know anything. Isn't it cute how she thinks that ice cream is like exotic, you know, kind of thing. And so they have this perception of her of being like, oh my god, she's so innocent and adorable, and meanwhile, she has quite a dark underside, but that she learns to hide because that's not what people want from her. Yeah? And it's not what's going to get her what she wants as well. Yeah. So she kind of spends a fair amount of the book playing up thinking like, golly gee, wide-eyed thing, but meanwhile she's like plotting her own thing. So I think that's another reason that Nora hates her early on, because she's like, what's this deer in the headlights thing? I don't like this. She's like, this is bullshit. I know this is not who you are, kind of thing. And actually when she starts to be a bit sort of darker and a bit more real, that's when their relationship becomes more interesting, I think.
No, definitely.
Yeah.
Now we have to obviously talk about the trials themselves.
Yes.
There are obviously, it's such a kind of interesting way of I suppose working out who's going to inherit the family kind of wealth and power. And with, like, weirdly enough, this coming out at the same time as a new Hunger Games.
Yeah, I didn't plan that. She announced this book way after I finished. I announced this one.
So, is there a particular trial that you had the most fun writing, and would you yourself survive?
So the trials are kind of based on, so they're basically kind of supposed to be based on those things that you see in a lot of fairy tales where it's like the king had 3 sons and he didn't know which one should inherit, so he sends them off into the woods to get the golden bird, and they pass an old lady on the road, and the first one kicks the old lady, and the second one spits on her, and the third one's like, have my sandwich. And it turns out the old lady knew where the bird was, and by not being a complete asshole, the third prince wins the prize. So it's sort of based on that kind of structure, but obviously there's so that's why it's sort of different virtues. There's obviously quite a lot of different virtues, and not all of them make you a good person. Yes. Like, there's virtues that are, you know, like one of the virtues that has been tested in the past in the family is intelligence, and you can be a smart, nasty person, you know, kind of thing. Or so I'm now going to go blank on what the 5 trials are in this book. Or one of them is honesty. Yeah. And like, yes, honesty is valuable, but also walking up to someone being like, well, you look ugly is not great. That again doesn't make you a great person. Kind of thing. So it's sort of this intransigent line, and it's kind of about the different virtues. And what I really wanted to do going into it was have them be a surprise, a bit like the ones that are in the fairy tales. If I didn't want it to be like, and you will all be tested at 11 o'clock on Thursday, kind of thing. So one of the things I did was I sat down and I just listed all the different virtues I could think of and see which ones would be most interesting to test. And some of them are possibly going to be underwhelming because they pop up and you don't even know it's a trial until it's over. I completely appreciate that. Probably the most fun to write was the bravery trial, because it involves rampaging trolls, a spoiler alert, and that is a pretty obvious, and it was sort of action-packed and pacey and fun. But also one of the, try not to be spoilery, but one of the characters loses because she doesn't face down the troll, she runs so that she pulls it away from other people so that they don't get hurt, which is arguably more virtuous than standing your ground, but that's not what was being tested. It was bravery, and running makes you look unbrave, kind of thing. So I just wanted to play with that sort of complexity. Really, there were a couple that got cut. I had the hardest time with the trial of selflessness, which is the maze trial. Or loyalty, rather, not selflessness. Sorry, even I get confused. They changed names a few times. Loyalty, because the maze trial was so hard to sort of get that right with the different POVs, and so that's why, again, no spoilers, it is presented the way that it is in the book, a little bit differently.
Yes. It's quite interesting when you're reading the trials as well, because you're almost trying to second guess in your head as you're reading it, like, oh, I think it's this, and I think that person's one.
I know, I like that. And I wanted that to sort of be like, there's a very brief moment of it where like one of them stops to give money to a homeless person, and she's like, well, obviously that's too obvious to be a trial, but I can't not do it because what if this person is a trial of my generosity kind of thing. But that's trial 101. But the one time I don't give money to a homeless person, that's where it's going to be like, it was a trial and you lost, you selfish girl. And it'd be like, but at the same time, that's the question that it was like, is it actually a virtue that you possess if you're doing it because you think someone's watching, kind of thing, because you think it might get you something.
That's interesting. And it kind of touches, I suppose, a little bit on, I was just thinking like, just the celebrity kind of angle of being seen to do the right thing, or like, start a charity or something.
Exactly.
Well, what's your kind of motivations?
Exactly. Again, The Good Place.
Again, The Good Place.
Great show.
And we also obviously have to talk about the magic system. And again, it's such a interesting kind of magic system because it's not, everyone has magic to a degree, like as even like I said, the norms, the normal people, doing various day jobs, making the city run, have a certain like degree of magic, and then obviously certain trinkets can be used to kind of increase that magical, kind of channel that magic into something. So where did that kind of all come from?
I sort of, because I wanted, though it's a fantasy world, I wanted the technology to be on par with kind of like our 1920s-ish kind of thing. But I felt like it was more fun if it was magical technology. And so a lot of the stuff that magic does is just stuff that technology does first. Now, someone asked me in an interview a little while ago, being like, what charm would you want to have? I was like, they all kind of do things that I have access to in real life. Like, there's a charm that, cools you down if you're too warm at a garden party or whatever. And it's like, well, we all have those mini fans if we want them, kind of thing. Or I think this ended up getting cut, but at one point, one of them had charmed shoes that don't sink into the grass. Again, a lot of things happen at a garden party. And I think we've all been at like an outdoor event in high heels where you're like wrenching your high heels out of the sod, kind of thing. Like they're meant to do kind of like practical everyday things, because I think if magic was able to be channeled like technology like it is here, that's the things that most people would use them for, is practical. You wouldn't use them to like summon down storms of fire onto your enemies every day. That's just, maybe in war times, but most of the time you'd be like, oh, like, people say that all the time, being like, oh, if I had a magical power, it would be to just be able to click my fingers and the dishes were done, or just be able to like teleport rather than have to take this long plane ride or whatever. We'd want to use it for practical things. That's kind of what I figured the magic system should be. And I wanted, a lot of times there are moments where they use the charms that are for practical things for bigger uses. Like she uses the charm that's supposed to sort of cool you down to like blow open the doors dramatically and make an entrance, but that's still an everyday charm that she's just tweaked a little bit, kind of thing. So I liked that little aspect.
So if you had to like devise a charm, I know obviously you've mentioned like we have certain things on our phones now, right, that you can kind of do, but is there anything that particularly gets you on like a day-to-day basis and you'd be, I love if I could do this?
I'm trying to think of like something that I literally can't do with either technology or like,
I mean, the fast travel thing would be quite cool.
I would definitely, if I had a power, it would definitely be teleportation. That's absolutely what I would pick.
Because summer on the tube is nice.
But I feel like that's not a power that a charm could do. That's that we're looking at something more like innate power. I guess we were talking about how we both need a haircut before the cameras roll. If I could like have a charm that perfectly styled my hair and it stayed like that all day, wouldn't that be magic?
Or like nails, like you could just say, I want purple whatever, and then they just, that
would be just really nice. Just like, again, casual everyday thing that might seem petty, but actually like, do you know how much time I waste like blow drying my hair and curling it that I could be using to, I don't know, like save the world?
Exactly. And then I leave the house and then a wind
literally and I was like, game over. Whereas if a charm held my hair perfectly every day and I could wake up 10 minutes before I had to be somewhere and just do like, and I looked impeccable, dream.
Yes. Like a pimped out like Dyson.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that'd be
I'm sure I feel like they had those machines in the Jetsons, like, you know, they came down and then it came up with like but it was the beehive at the time. Like, I feel like it's harder for like just, you know, the natural look.
Now we have to also mention, so this is interesting, and I think you have mentioned it to me before, and then I kind of forgot, and then I kind of remembered, that this book and the book that's to follow is based in the same universe as Rebel, and it may not be kind of obvious, even on first glance or even kind of first reading, but was that always kind of what you wanted to do?
Yeah, I mean, when I finished Rebel of the Sands, I sat down with my agent and pitched her multiple other ideas, and she was like, these all sound great, pick one. And there were a few different reasons I picked the Notorious Virtues. One was that the other idea was very action-packed and action-heavy, and the last book of Rebel of the Sands had been very action-packed and action-heavy, and I was a little bit run down of writing action. So I was like, I'd actually like to write something that's got more ball gowns and parties and a bit more luxury, and that I can, you know, relax into a little bit, and there's a bit less blowing up of things. So that was part of it. But the other reason was that I did want to continue a little bit the story of Rebel of the Sands and kind of start building that universe. I don't have a name for it. It's not like a Grishaverse like Leigh Bardugo's ones or Cosmere. I don't have a name for it. But I think there are probably some characters in Rebel of the Sands that people, when I've talked about it to readers when Rebel of the Sands was first out, they're like, oh, I hope it's this character who, and I was like, it's definitely not the character that you're hoping it's going to be who comes over. So it's a side character from the Rebel of the Sands series who was a teenager in Rebel of the Sands, is someone's grandmother in the Notorious Virtues. And I think that was, I think that's a good connection in terms of it being enough of a connection in the same world, but not so you feel like you have to have read Rebel.
Yes.
But hopefully if you enjoy the Notorious Virtues, you might go back and revisit Rebel. You know, if you have already read Rebel, you might be excited to see the Easter eggs. There's rewards there for you if you have read the Rebel of the Sand series of like, oh, I know what, you know, Desert Rebellion they're referring to there. It's the one in Rebel of the Sand. It's not subtle as the titles go. So I think there's that aspect, which can be quite fun, but you don't have to. You can read them absolutely independently. And then the other thing that was interesting about doing that is that in terms of the magic system, it is a different magic system between Rebel and Notorious, but the guardrails that I set up in and the sort of parameters that I set up in Rebel of the Sands still apply. So for instance, I established in Rebel of the Sands that all immortal beings are only male. They have no female counterparts, which is why there's often half immortal, half mortal children in the world. And so that kind of was like when I was then talking about immortal beings in Notorious Virtues, and I was sort of doing research of immortal beings that existed in sort of German or Nordic or whatever folklore. There's a lot of women sort of like, you know, spirits in those. And I was like, well, you're out, you know, kind of thing. I can't model something on you because I had set up those parameters. But I think it makes it a bit more interesting, especially because a lot of the female immortal things that crop up in Germanic and Nordic things are like, and then they lured them into their woods with their sexy siren song, and that doesn't super interest me. Do you know what I mean? I'd much rather have immortal beings that are doing more grandiose things than trying to kill men in the woods. So yeah,
more big.
They have bigger fish to fry.
Exactly.
But it still did, you know, make it a tiny bit trickier. So there's again a slight nod to Rebel of the Sands when Lotte doesn't know who her father is, and someone speculates like, oh, could she be, you know, half immortal? And then they're immediately like, her mom's not nearly like good enough to attract an immortal being. Like those people are supposed to be like virtuous and good, kind of thing. So that's like a little bit of a nod to the mythology of Rebel of the Sands, but I don't have any half immortal people, because they are in abundance in Rebel of the Sands. I felt like I'd done that, and I wanted to do something else.
There's just little hints,
yes,
like you said, little Easter eggs, and it's just really fun to kind of find. And funny you should say about action, because this would have been some time ago. You used to do, or you've been trained to do like stage hunting.
Yeah, when I was a teenager.
Does that when you're doing kind of action scenes, or like, okay, so this character's going to jump over here, do you actually kind of act that out in your head, or even do it like for real.
I wish I was that dexterous. I think something that it was really different switching from first person point of view to third person point of view in this, and it actually took me a while to get used to. Like when I was first writing my pitch pages, I'd be like, she walked down the street, I looked up at the sky, and I was like, nope, backspace kind of thing. But I think writing in first person for Rebel of Sands did teach me a lot about writing action sequences, because I think there's a temptation when you're writing action sequences to over describe, and then people are trying to be like, okay, wait, she blocked his left hand with his right hand, and I think what I actually take away from action sequences is more like the impact that it's having. I could care less whether it's like right hand, left hand, or whether it's like it really hurt when you got punched in the face kind of thing. And so I think that's something you do more naturally in first person, because you know you're sort of close, you can't focus on the whole battlefield or the whole, like, if loads of people are fighting, so it's like me, and I'm distantly aware of this in my periphery, and so I think I sort of did kind of bring that over to Notorious Virtues as well. There aren't as many action sequences in it. The one that was the hardest to block, it was and I did like draw a map for this, is that there is a scene in sort of a magical speakeasy where a bunch of rich people are there, and then they're invaded by people who wish them harm. And there's quite a lot of like, okay, they're coming in from this angle, the door is here, and she's going to take shelter behind the bar to avoid sort of fire. So that was hard to block, because there was so much space to play with, and it was actually important of like to get behind an object so that you have buy time to do this thing that's going to get you out, kind of thing. But yeah, that one was a nightmare to write.
And I've always kind of wondered on a kind of connected with that, and also obviously I've seen your massive book collection, and there are so many.
I cleared out like a bunch on fun day, because I was literally tripping over them as I got out of bed. It was getting bad.
They're everywhere. You've got obviously quite a variety in there as well, and a ton of kind of amazing adult fantasy. Have you considered writing adult fantasy?
It's interesting. So this idea was definitely always YA, and I think I've thought of myself for a long time as a YA writer, but also because I was so young when my first one came out. I was only 26. Now I'm 10 years older. I've aged terribly. And I've thought a little bit about it. I shouldn't say too much that my agent doesn't even know about yet, but I have an idea that I'm really excited about for something I want to do after I complete the Rebel of the Sands duology. And I thought about it as YA. But there's also, and I think the characters in it would need to be young, but they don't necessarily need to be 16. They could be 20. Do you know what I mean?
Yes,
and it would kind of be the same impact. So my current plan is to sort of write some of it and run it by my agent and be like, do you think this is YA? Do you think this is adult? I kind of don't know.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I think the possibility is definitely out there, but I think I still would probably, I would be surprised if someone in their 40s crept their way in as a point of view character into my books right now. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I'm closer to my 40s than I am to 16. But I feel like I have like an impulse towards like coming of age.
Yes.
But I think there still is a coming of age possibility in adult books. But I don't think I would ever. Yeah, I'm trying to think how to, but I don't know that I could ever write like very adult content, if that makes sense.
Okay,
I feel like I could tone up my violence possibly, and there's some things, but I don't see myself writing like a graphic romantasy.
Yes.
If that makes sense.
Yes.
I think there I'd still be a bit pro-clutching to be like, well, no, my father's going to read this, kind of thing. Not trying to give him a heart attack. And that's just not maybe what I enjoy reading romance a lot, but it's maybe just not what I tend towards.
Yes. Yeah.
So long rambling answer. Maybe we'll see what my agent says my next idea is. If she looks at it and goes, it's YA, then it'll be YA.
Yeah.
We'll see. But I've been calling it upper YA. And then suddenly I was like, is upper YA just adult?
Yeah, I suppose there's kind of other, I don't know, there's genres within genres, and kind of say the whole new, like, oh god, what is it not new adult? That's what I was thinking of. That I don't think that's ever quite caught on as big a way, especially in the UK, as maybe in the US. But it almost felt like that was purely for just dirty books.
Yeah, and there's a line
Nothing
where
wrong with
like
that.
it's like there's like the Rainbow Rowell where she's at university,
Yes.
which is called.
Oh.
We can both do this because we both read it. Oh my god, Fangirl.
Yes.
Fangirl.
Yeah.
Fangirl. She's
I
at
was
university.
looking
Yes.
on my shelf.
Yeah, I was like, I can see the cover. She's got a laptop. It's
Yeah,
John.
it's like,
No, she's at university, and that's technically YA.
Yeah.
Whereas like Fourth Wing, they're at, let's call it university. She's the same. You know, the character Violet, and that is the same age as the main character and thing. And I was like, but well, that's adults, and so I think it's so much about, you know, content and the audience that it hits.
Yes.
So
yeah. No, that's fair.
But I also think since I've started writing fantasy, adult fantasy space has become a more female space than it was 10 years ago. Like, one of the reasons I started reading YA was because I was like, where are all the women? You know, kind of thing. I love a lot of adult fantasy, and I will love Game of Thrones till the day I die. But, you know, I was like, all right, now where's the women writing the same thing? And they were in YA. And now I think it's just a better space for women in adult fantasy, which is nice to see.
No, very, very nice to see. And for your, wrapping up, so for your last kind of couple of questions,
Quick fire.
Yeah. What do you, so you have, this is a duology, right?
Correct,
So
yeah.
how far along is book 2?
What are you, my agent, my
Yeah,
editor?
I'm so sorry.
It's going slower than I would like. I think some of that is, if I'm being completely candid, some of it is my, is like, this took so long that it's been a minute since I wrote a first draft.
Yeah.
Some of it is just, I have like had this flu that's been going around on and off since Christmas. Like I feel like I haven't not been sick since Christmas. I also love it to bits, but I have started working, while this book was taking forever and I was waiting for edits, I started working part-time as a bookseller, which I love to death. I've just agreed to go down to 2 days a week from that so that I have more time to write, because I was just being overly ambitious about what I could do while also working. So taking those steps, and also just, you know, I also had a carbon monoxide leak in my flat over Christmas that it turns, and I looked back on some of the things I'd written while I was poisoned by carbon monoxide. I was like, well, this makes no sense. I was like, who wrote this? Couldn't be me. So I feel like I'm like, I don't want to make the dog ate my homework a lot of excuses. I wish it was going faster, but it is going.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good. That's good. And what are you currently reading, watching? And I know you don't like game as such, but if there's any kind of like board games or anything in that space that you're looking forward to.
So I'm reading 2 things at the moment. I'm reading Lauren Hamilton Murray, no relation. I'm reading Heir of Storms, which is her YA debut that comes out in June. I'm having a great time reading it. It's like, it's YA that wants to be YA. I feel like a lot of YA I've read recently has, as like we were talking about, I've been like, why isn't this just adult kind of thing? But I can't wait as a bookseller to put it in the hands of 13-year-olds. And it's again, it's also got trials in it. It's sort of people with different elemental powers competing for the throne. Ball gowns, magical powers, love it. It's great. The other one that I just started, so I'm reading that as a physical book. The one that I'm reading as an ebook is The Rose Bargain by Sasha Payton Smith. It's so good. It has no right to be as good as it is. No, I didn't quite know what to expect when I went in, because people were pitching it to me as Bridgerton with fairies. And I was like, oh, I like Bridgerton. Let's see what this is. Instantly obsessed. It's so good. It's a world where it's sort of Regent's England, but the queen is a fairy queen, and everyone has a chance to make one bargain with her, and you have to trade something in your lifetime. So the main character's sister, when she entered society, made a bargain and then disappeared for a number of days and has come back and is presumed ruined. So she's now going into society as sister to a ruined person, but what happened to her sister, and is the prince involved? And it's great. 10 out of 10. I am watching Severance. The finale is tomorrow. I don't know whether I'm going to be completely satisfied or mad that I now have to wait. How many years do you think it's going to be until the next season? It was 3 between season 1 and 2, and I know there were strikes and things. And again, I'm not one to talk about how long shit takes, but I'm really hoping it's a really satisfying ending, and that we get some answers to the mysteries, because I love me some Lost mystery box, but also I need some answers. And then I don't know. I saw them arguing about this on Actually. Does the New York Times games count as gaming? Wordle and Connections? Because I got hooked on those. I saw people they were like literally having this argument on Actually on Dropout, and they were like, no, that's not a game, but Candy Crush is. And they're like, but they're both things you play on your phone. So I think it's a game. It's literally called the New York Times games. I don't know if that counts as gaming.
I'd say that. I think everyone kind of like has their own definition of gaming, and I think it's something that it's a release, and it's fun, and it can be educational, and it can just be shoot the bad guy.
Exactly. I played, again, as I mentioned in lockdown, I played a lot of The Sims 2. Downloaded it onto my my old out of use MacBook that doesn't run without being plugged in. It's basically a desktop, because then I was like, that way I won't get hooked, and then cut to I'm locked down, and I'm always in the plug, and it was just very relaxing, during like the lockdown. And I think I don't particularly like competitive things, although I did really win last time we played a board game.
You did.
What was it called?
God, that botanical.
Yeah, the botanical. We played a board game at a friend's birthday that was botanical thing. And I'm not going to say I swept the floor with everyone, but you can say it for me.
Yeah. No, I was stuck in Spain at the end of it. I didn't even get home. I'm still in Spain.
I'm always like the unassumed one. The first time I ever played Catan, I won. Because my brother and dad had been playing it for ages and begging me to join, and I was like, I'll join. Yeah, and then I just quietly built the longest road. I didn't know what I was up to.
Else was
I was like, I think I won. But yeah, not that I'm competitive.
I was going to say that's almost like a Lotte kind of.
Just quietly competitive.
Quietly kicking out.
I worry that I am a Lotte, but want to be a Nora. We all aspire to be Nora, but are actually Lottes.
This is the thing, like a Cosmo quiz. Like, which character?
Which character are you? Oh no, I got Grace. I'm the worst. Grace is Lottie's mother.
She's interesting.
She's a lot.
Interesting. We'll say that. But yeah, thank you, Alwyn,
Thanks
so much
for
joining us today.
You talk about FPTV so much. I'm honoured to finally be on.
Yay! And for everyone watching at home, we have a lovely special edition of this, and we have a limited. I'm not going to remember how many badges we got left. We have got a few really cool the wolf head badges that will go along with pre-orders, and selection of those will go to our stores as well. So if you're lucky on publication day, you'll get yourself a very cool pin badge and a beautiful signed edition. But yeah, thank you so much, and we will catch you next time. Bye.
If you're enjoying watching Forbidden Planet TV, and you're enjoying watching us talk to the world's most interesting and accomplished filmmakers, authors, artists, musicians, creators, subscribe right here. See you soon.